Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever podcast together. I'm joined by my co-founder and business partner, Gareth Williams. Gareth, why don't you introduce us a little bit?
So this is actually my first ever podcast. So just to add to the pressure, I this is the first ever podcast I've done. So looking forward to it. I'm a founder and architect. I was a early adopter of ChatGPT, and I've been following the progress of the AI industry very closely. Did a small education well-being platform, which is in close to 300 schools at the moment. And as James said, we've just started Autonify, our new business.
I actually remember that first moment, Gareth, when you showed me ChatGPT, and we probably had a little bit too much to drink. Uh,
Yeah, but it's a good bar, so
Yeah, true. It was amazing. I mean, at the time, I thought you were a little bit crazy because of your enthusiasm about this technology. But then I woke up the next day and thought, you know what, I'm going to have a look at this and have a serious deep dive. And my God, that was not a day. That was probably an entire week, which has now spanned into 2 years of us, exploring and sending links to each other every other week, right? It's just amazing the evolution of what we've seen. I think it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was crazy even back then. This was 2 or 3 years ago, before 3.5 GPT. So that was, pretty early in in the AI world. So yeah, it's incredible to see where it's gone, where it came from, and where it's going, and what the power of it is now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's kind of interesting. So we've gone 2 years. We're full circle now, launching the company. So I guess for those of you who are listening for the first time, or you haven't seen any of our kind of social media launching the company. So basically, Autonify is an agentic platform, and what we are trying to do is basically unlock business value from the data that enterprises have. And we've been building lots and lots of AI agents to help companies do that, like understanding what data they have, looking at data quality, building data meshes that are fully governed to help organizations access the data they need. I guess starting question for you, Gareth, is everyone seems to be launching AI companies right now, left, right, and center. Why does the world need another AI company out there? What's fundamentally wrong with the landscape, I guess?
Well, I think when you think about like enterprise organizations, they have like so many data sources, and not just talking like, tens or hundreds or thousands. You're talking like tens of thousands of data sources. And there's just too much data for them to manage. You've got to do their best because they get good engineers, they get good data architects, they get good data programs in place to try and figure out what this data looks like, see what the provenance of the data is, the lineage, the quality, all these aspects around the data. They'll run a squad to try and figure out what's going on in their data universe. But it's not feasible, right? You've got 4 to 6
Mm,
people, data teams trying to manage 3,000 plus data sets. The maths doesn't add up. So, there's an element there of just lost opportunity because there's so much data. No one knows what the data looks like. No one knows where the data is. People are just rebuying the same data. For example, you got multiple teams against multiple business units. They'll all be buying the same data. There's no sharing and being cost effective with that data. So yeah, there's that's
it's interesting. Yeah, I know.
what
I've seen the same, Gareth, 100%. And actually, it surprised me when I was speaking very early on to a lot of these enterprises how big that kind of offset is. You mentioned there thousands of data sources, very small data teams. That's just an impossible kind of mountain that these organizations are trying to climb. And I think what's also surprised me is there's a lot of companies out there, and there's almost this assumption that's been made. I think getting data to AI is kind of a solved problem, but actually getting data to humans, getting data to teams, getting data accessible across the enterprise, that is not a solved problem. That has been a problem I've seen time and time again over the past decade. And if anything, that problem just amplifies with the introduction of AI, because AI is incredibly data hungry. You only get good results with AI based on the data you put in. There's a well-known saying, garbage in, garbage out. I'm just surprised that I'm happy, but also surprised that this isn't kind of a solved problem, right? It just kind of seems crazy to me, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we always feel bad about using Kodak as a and as an example here because they didn't deserve all the bad press they get from this. But there's multiple companies that could be facing that Kodak moment where they fail to recognize the opportunity of AI tooling to help them through this, and they continue to sink millions of pounds into data-driven projects as opposed to looking to alternatives in the AI world.
Yeah, I mean, that has surprised me as well, actually. It's just, I guess there's three things. I mean, firstly, there's that offset of just so many data sources and just data being incredibly complex. And I think often because of that, these projects just end up becoming so expensive. There's so many resources that end up getting sprung at it. And because of that, there's just this massive delay that actually what may have started off as a genuine initiative that we want to create business value and we want to create business opportunity from AI, it ends up getting kicked so far downstream because to even get to base camp, you've got to go through all of these activities, right? Go through data governance bodies, go through, understand what data exists, understand who should be accessing that data. Like there's so transforming data into data warehouses. There's so many steps companies got to go through, and then you're 18 months down the line. You've done a lot of work, but you don't have any actual business value to show for it, right? And that's crazy that in this day and age where you've got startups who are using Cursor, Windsurf, Claude, whatever, reinventing the landscape, and you've got enterprises spending 18 months on, trying to get some kind of cohesion over their data. That's madness. Really, really crazy.
Yeah,
Really is.
absolutely. How do you think the onset of AI has like changed your professional outlook on and your approach to, your own?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, for us, and I guess we can both talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the analogy I used the other day was what I used to do was when I was flying to go and visit a customer or a prospect or go to a conference or anything, that would be amazing, especially if it was like an 11-hour flight, because you knew that you were going to have those 11 hours of deep concentration that you can go in and tackle a really hard coding problem because you're just cut off from the outside world, right? No internet, you're just deep in your space, in your flow, going for it. And actually, now I don't think I would code on a long flight. And the reason for that is I've become so attuned to using these AI tools. It just doesn't seem like a good use of my time to go on a flight and code. I would much rather do something that AI isn't good at, like maybe create a presentation or start to write an article or some other activity in the business, right? And for me, I've become so dependent on these AI coding tools now because they're so powerful. Just going in and being able to vibe code is what it's called, vibe code, and just say, I need this feature. It comes back with a little bit of code. You edit it, you refine it, you review it, you give it another command, you add a little bit more functionality. The return on investment and the value you get from these tools is just incredible. And I think we've been able to build so quickly, right? It's crazy what we've accomplished. Yeah, how about you? What's your feeling?
Yeah, much similar. Although I would say on those long journeys, I would probably aim to do a bit of sense checking of the
Mm-hmm.
of the AI code base that we've created. As we've noticed, it's incredibly easy for it to get out of hand because you're just moving so fast. Like
Yeah.
we're building so many features every day. There's no time between feature drops to do anything. So you almost have to take a very conscious effort to make sure you review the code at development time, at the time where you're typing the prompts in to get the best sort of outcomes, because it goes into a pile of pull requests and the pull you end up with like 20 pull requests for a week's worth, and then you've got so much code and so much to review. It's quite verbose, and a lot of times it's very verbose in what it's doing. So it's almost like that shift left pattern that people used to talk about in testing, right? You want to shift all that validation of the code base and the pull requests, the stuff you would have done in the pull request when you're working with another team member. You want to sort of approach that, you want to take that approach with your AI coding as well, your vibe coding, because that's a real issue, is the sort of amount of code that you have to sift through as an engineer when you're working with these AI platforms.
Yeah.
So I
I
found that
think
if
Go ahead. Go ahead.
one last thing, yeah, I just find that as I found it very beneficial to really drill down and review every time I ask Claude, I use to generate some code, I will sit there and be like, I will read every file. I'll make sure that the file is well structured based on my experience myself. If I'm doing a front end, I'll make sure the UI components have been structured correctly. They are using best practice, and often a case is it's not using the best practice, and you have to go and say, go and use best practice, and then all of a sudden it uses best practice. So it's just having that awareness. Yeah, that's my experience.
It's that human. It's funny because I've seen this in development teams as well, and you must see it. Developers can be incredibly lazy, and it's almost that human nature of the AI is that you've given me a very vague prompt, and I'm going to be as lazy as possible to deliver this in the most minimum amount of work possible, right? And I've seen that too. So coming back to what we were talking about earlier, garbage in, garbage out. If I put very vague requirements in there, the probability of me getting what I want is much lower than if I actually spend some more time on the problem statement. So I've started now going into ChatGPT or Claude and almost creating, like, I don't want to call them mini user stories, but they kind of are. It's like, very comprehensive requirements of this is what I want the AI to build. These are the steps I wanted to go through, and these are the validations afterwards. And actually what I've seen is the results are just so much more powerful than if I just went in and was lazy and just gave a quick sentence of, I want a registration form with blah, blah, blah. Instead, it's like, this is a really, really concise and clear summary of what I want to be built. And I think to me, that just indicates kind of what's kind of happening a little bit. I think the role of the developer is becoming, I don't want to say devalued, because I think good developers are almost X'd at this point with what they can achieve, but it does create a massive disparity. And I think the other thing here is it just offsets the value to everyone else in the software development lifecycle. Your product managers all of a sudden become more valuable because understanding the pain point and the problems is incredibly valuable. Being able to articulate that into something you want AI to build, again, incredibly valuable. Testers are going to become even more valuable because there's a whole lot of code going out there in the world that, has not been tested properly, right? And it's been created by AI and it needs testing, it needs assuring. And, it may not be so much that assurance is on, do the features work? But definitely that assurance needs to be on, has what been built actually meets the requirements of what the business needed in the first place, right? So I guess for me, it's interesting. I think over the next 2 to 5 years, maybe even sooner, maybe in the next 6 months, the way we create software is just going to rapidly change again, right? And it's hard to keep up with, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really hard.
And I've seen it's really important to, well, you describe putting a lot of upfront effort into creating the perfect prompt to get the perfect results, but often cases is the best way to do is give the AI the guardrails. So create the tests first. So we would create a test suite, often with AI's help, to create the test suite of what we expect the application to do. And then you can just sort of encourage it to iterate over itself to really narrow down the issue, narrow down the solution. So it starts off, and it always starts off wrong. It writes the tests and then it tries to change the tests. So you have to be explicit. Don't change the tests. You created these tests for a reason. So it's good to give them guardrails, and that really encourages the sort of iterations over the code base to be to the benefit of the code, rather than to be just circumvent the code and just change the test. Found that very helpful. Also, I use a lot of thinking models, especially in that initial prompt. So my initial prompt will usually use a thinking model, and at the end of the prompt, I will be telling it, think and present your solution back to me, but don't do anything until I've told you I'm happy with what your solution is. And that's quite a nice way, because I'm a bit more lazy than you, James. I don't do so much upfront prompt engineering. I've got my de facto statements that I use, and I sort of just they've worked for me, so I've stuck with them. But that's part of it, is at the end of it, I will ask it to think about it, come back, and even then we can iterate and be like, well, I don't really like this approach, or it's not going to really work with our folder structure. You haven't considered this context. And then you can say, right, go ahead and do it. And that for me has been quite good. It's been quite powerful. I've got some really good outcomes from that.
It's interesting. I completely agree with you. I think I've spoken to a lot of other people about this as well. And I think everyone's almost, based on their experiences, have started to create their own little library in their head of this is how I want to interact with the AI, this is how I get the results I want for what I'm doing, right? I also think obviously we've been talking, and a lot of the value that people are becoming familiar with AI is based on this whole coding world, right? I can use AI to help me code, blah blah blah. Obviously, with Autonify, we're looking at how we can apply AI to help enterprises with unlocking their data, to help data teams with their transformation and extracting that value, right? Maybe you want to share a little bit, Gareth, about some of the agents we've been building and what kind of, because obviously everyone's so familiar with coding and how it can help. I guess, how can AI help these data teams or these, people who are responsible for helping with data in organizations and unlocking value and applying intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've been building this for the last 6 weeks now, so it's quite exciting technology. We have, we start the process is actually, first of all, we don't use AI to start the process, which is very weird for an AI company, but we actually have we have an agent, even though it's not an AI agent, it's still a bit of agentic software that runs in our ecosystem. And effectively what happens is when you register a data source with our software, we will first of all we'll sense check, we'll check that we can connect to the database and we have the right permissions and everything like that. But also then what happens once you registered that data source is we go to the data source and start scanning it. And we just go through your data source and scan every single bit of information, not the actual data itself, the metadata. So we go and capture like the schemas, the databases, the tables, the columns, the column types, and any bit of information that would be useful, especially stuff like relationships and things like how your data is joined together. And now that really gives us a base of understanding over that data set. And what it allows us to do then is to start layering on our AI agents. And what our AI agents are doing is really enriching that like core data. So you have this, we just have at the moment some basic information about your database, which isn't hard. You can go to PG admin and look at the information schema and get like quite a lot of information the same way we do. But when you start layering on the AI agents, all of a sudden it starts to paint a different picture. For example, the first one we introduced was data sensitivity. It's a big topic, right? Like GDPR in the UK, massive. Personal information everywhere. It's massive for all organizations. You can get significant fines if you get it wrong. But if you've got 3,000 data sources, how do you know where the PII is? So one of the first things we did is we wrote an agent that actually will identify PII and GDPR and sensitivity. So not just PII, not just GDPR, but actually sensitivity within columns, which gives us that all of a sudden now we have more insight into the data. So we know we've got a catalog, which is great. We've got some ownerships around that catalog, but also now we've got some real deep understanding of the sensitivity and the GDPR of that table or that column, which is phenomenal, right? We're also, one of the other ones is data quality. So what we see is in a lot of enterprises that they have all these systems and they grow like organically. So we see spreadsheets being used as a master. The spreadsheet then gets uploaded into a database and the database is used for reporting, for example. That's quite a common flow that we see. And in none of them steps are any data quality checks done. They don't, in a lot of organizations, there's not even a filtering on the spreadsheet. There's no drop downs or anything like that. So it's like a completely unstructured, unregulated, unvalidated sort of end-to-end process. And it's just crazy to think that still exists in this modern world where everything's so easy and everything's so, you can build a UI in seconds. It's just a factor of enterprises. So what we can do is we can actually monitor tables. So then tables that we've scanned, we can actually run data quality rules on it on a regular cadence. So every we configure it to however you want, but say every day we will run a scan of your data sources based on rules that have been generated by AI to give you a head start, but you can also add your own data quality rules, and it will start to understand that data. Is the email address in this table conforming to a regular expression? Is the value of minimum price less than the value of the maximum price? And this is all stuff that the AI is actually able to build. So we don't have to go and build all these rules So the AI can build these data quality rules, and we run them via our platform. And then you can layer on your own rules, or you can amend the AI's rules as you see fit. But we've had really good success with that, and found that we've been able to really achieve quite a lot with that sort of approach.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I think that's amazing because that's, as we were talking about at the beginning, getting from zero to base camp is the really, really hard problem, right? And, firstly, organizations have no idea what data they have because they're so overwhelmed with all of these, huge amount of data sources, right? And then once you do connect to these data sources, as you said, there's often data quality issues, there's often governance around that. The piece that I'm really, really excited about, just because it's kind of where the industry is going in applying intelligence, is the final piece, which is making the data available. And I think, it's a lot of organizations have this data which lives in silos, right? And what we have in our platform is something called a data mesh. And that data mesh basically allows us to join all of this data together and make it available. And also that can be made available in a compliant fashion. So if there's PII, there's sensitive data, that data isn't exposed over the data mesh, right? So you can have various rules and responsibility, who should have access to what data, etc. Now, the key bit is this is absolutely a human problem. I've seen this for the past decade. Testers, engineers, data scientists, systems getting access to the data all joined up. Really hard problem, definitely unsolved. And to solve that, it takes a lot of people, many years to be able to get the organization to a state they can do that, right? And we're at a state now where actually you can do that autonomously, having AI agents help you. But the key bit is it's not just humans and it's not just systems that need access to this data now. It's also agentic workflows and AI itself, right? And I think that's really key, is that to be able to unlock the data in an enterprise, to be able to move an enterprise forward, that they can start reaping the benefits of this technology, that data has to be made available, right? And that's really, really key. And I'm really excited about that because that is the business outcome. That's where every organization wants to be. How do we tap into this gold mine of data we have? How do we make it available? How do we start overlaying intelligence and, strengthening our competitive edge? Because if enterprise don't do it, to your Kodak point at the beginning, someone else will. Another company will come in who is collecting this data, enriching it, reaping the insights, and that's going to be the landscape organizations are competing on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of coined that the data firewall, haven't we? Within Autonify, we've got the data mesh, and what sits on top of it is a data firewall to ensure the security. It is interesting because now there's this sort of new dynamic of security. Like we've always had, if you think about it, RBAC, role-based access control, has been part of organizations now for forever. Like it's a well-trodden path. But now all of a sudden, and you've got system-to-system authorization, which is service principals that have access to something. But now we're at the stage where actually you don't want certain elements of your infrastructures, your MCP servers, for example. You don't want them to have access to certain things. You don't want to accidentally give your MCP access to data which isn't owned by that team. That can have quite severe consequences if you don't shield your data, your data off from other people. But at the same time, the world is going, well, you need to just open the floodgates and let all your data through so that you can get the best solution, with AI. But it's just not feasible. That's why we built this sort of data firewall on top of the data mesh to sort of secure those endpoints where every MCP or every registration has its own distinct access criteria within our platform. So you get that real reassurance that you're going to be, that AI can't access stuff it's not going to be able to. You can see it all within the platform, which is just super.
100%. But I'm really, really excited about that. I think that is amazing. I think it's groundbreaking. And I think this is one of the biggest areas enterprises are struggling with right now, to be frank. So I know we're coming up close to time. I've got two questions for you, Gareth. Number one, I guess, is this is where we are with Autonify now. What's next? What are we working on over the next couple of months? What are you most excited about?
Oh, that's a good question. Lots of things. We have some, tidy up tasks that we're doing, which are not so exciting. But also, we're looking forward to we're sort of expanding at such a rapid pace to try and keep up with the industry, like everyone else is, right? So we have strong integrations with MC, and we're building a RAG, and we're building RAG capabilities. We're building knowledge knowledge graph capabilities. We are trying to keep up with the market. So that's another sort of benefit to us, is that we're trying to stay at the bleeding edge so that we can help other organizations with adopting. But the best thing we're looking at is this sort of bring your own agents sort of approach.
Mm.
Now that we've done the hard work and heavy lifting, and we've run our agents on top of your data, we want to be able to give that back to you and say, here's a workflow engine where you can configure your own agents based on the metadata that we've been able to generate. So that's by far the sort of biggest thing we're going to be delivering in the future, is that ability to be able to really dig in from your own engineers, your own data architects will be able to use workflow engines to be able to do things with our data. And that's really, really interesting, a bit of work we've been doing at the moment. So
I think
really
that's
excited
amazing
about that.
because that gives us almost the full end-to-end platform for organizations. As I said at the beginning, being able to extract value and being able to apply intelligence to their data. If we can come along almost instantaneously, we've connected to a data source, or we've connected to several data sources across the enterprise, or thousands if you want to, all the way to the full other end of the spectrum of we are unlocking business value and we are helping your enterprise build these agentic workflows that are going to drive intelligence and drive that organization forward. I mean, that's massive, and that's where we want to be, right? I guess just one more question for you, Gareth. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this have got quite excited, hopefully. What would be the next steps if someone was interested in Autonify, wanted to speak to us? Where should they go? How should they get in contact, I guess?
Well, I mean, the best way is you can reach out to either myself or James at gareth.williams@autonify.ai or james.walker@autonify.ai, or go onto the website, sign up to the newsletter, or follow us on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. All right, Gareth, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed your first ever podcast.
Yeah, it's
And thank
terrifying.
you to the listeners. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Thanks.